The towel slipped a little lower on her hip as she leaned past me, reaching for the wine glasses on the top shelf. I pretended not to notice, kept my eyes fixed on the flickering candle between us, but she must have felt my gaze, or maybe just sensed the air shift. Her arm brushed mine on the way back down, slow, deliberate. I heard her exhale, soft, near my neck. Not a word passed between us, but everything changed in that breath. The room was quiet except for the rain tapping against the window, and I swear the silence carried more weight than any touch could have. She set the glass down in front of me, her fingers grazing mine for just a second too long. And when I finally looked up, really looked, she didn't look away. My name's Ethan. I'm 28, work in property maintenance for a small chain of boutique apartment buildings downtown. It's not glamorous, but it keeps the lights on. Most days I patch drywall, unclog drains, fix the occasional heater. I wear the same pair of jeans until they fray at the knees. Nobody pays much attention to the maintenance guy, which, honestly, is fine by me. Life's been steady, if not exactly thrilling. I rent a quiet place on the second floor of one of the buildings I help take care of. The walls are thin, the pipes groan like old ghosts when it's cold, and the radiator makes this clicking sound every time it heats up, but it's mine. I keep it tidy, quiet, predictable. Until a Tuesday in late March, when someone new moved into Unit 3B. I was fixing the mailbox lock in the lobby when the door opened behind me. I heard the wheels of a suitcase first, then the click of heels, deliberate but not rushed. When I turned, she was standing there, adjusting the strap of a leather bag on her shoulder. Early 40s, maybe. Tall, composed. The kind of elegance that doesn't try too hard. Linen trousers, loose button down, no makeup except for maybe a hint of mascara. Hair tied up in a low knot, a few strands falling free in that perfect, accidental way. She smiled when she saw me. Not the polite, distracted kind. The kind that lands somewhere in your chest before your brain catches up. "You must be Ethan," she said, her voice low and even. "Am I right?" I stood, brushing dust off my palms. "Yeah, that obvious." She nodded toward my tool belt with a small smile. "Just a guess." I laughed, a little awkward. "You must be new in 3B. "That's right," she said. "Sophie Blake." She extended a hand. Her grip was firm but warm, her skin smooth. I probably held on half a second longer than I should have. "I'll be staying here for a while," she said, glancing around the lobby like she was seeing it for the first time. "Divorce just finalized. Thought I'd try the city for a bit." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. "Well, welcome, I guess. If you need anything, I'm usually around." She tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly. "Good to know." That was all. No flirtation, nothing out of line. But something about the way she looked at me before heading up the stairs, steady, unreadable, like she already knew too much, stayed with me long after she disappeared from view. The next morning, I saw her again in the courtyard. She was sitting on one of the benches, legs crossed, reading a book with a mug of coffee beside her. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and chose not to react. Either way, I stood there longer than I should have, pretending to check the mailboxes, pretending not to be watching her. The day after that, I found myself fixing a window latch in the stairwell just as she was coming down. She paused beside me. "You really are always around, aren't you?" I grinned. "Like I said, just doing my job." "Right," she said. Then added, almost as an afterthought, "Good hands are hard to find." I don't know why that line lingered the way it did. Maybe it was her tone, neutral on the surface, but something else underneath. Or maybe it was the way she didn't look back as she walked out the door, leaving only the faintest trace of something I couldn't quite name. But from that moment, I started noticing everything. When she opened her blinds, when she took her coffee out to the courtyard, when the light in her living room stayed on late. I told myself it was just curiosity, just a neighbor, just proximity. But deep down, I already knew better. A week passed, maybe a little more, before we spoke again. But Sophie was always there, somehow, in glimpses. Early mornings, stepping out in a slate blue robe to collect her mail, steam rising from the mug in her hand. Afternoons, reading by the window, sunlight skimming her cheekbones like it had been waiting all day to find her. I tried not to notice. Tried to tell myself I wasn't noticing. But you can only lie to yourself for so long. It was Thursday when I finally knocked on her door. I had a work order in hand, something about a faulty baseboard heater in her unit, a request she'd apparently put in through the front office. My palms were unusually dry, which made no sense. I'd done this 100 times. Fixing things was what I did. It had nothing to do with who lived behind the door. But when it swung open and she stood there in a soft gray sweater and faded jeans, barefoot, her toenails a pale pink. Yeah, something cracked open in my chest. "Hi," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Wasn't sure if you'd be by today. Got the ticket this morning." I held up the clipboard like it mattered. "Shouldn't take long." She stepped aside to let me in. "Come on." The heater in question was along the far wall of her bedroom. The room was bright, mostly white, a few soft green plants in the window. A bookshelf near the bed, nothing too polished, worn spines, dog-eared pages. Lived in. I kneeled by the unit, popped off the panel. She stayed in the doorway for a while, watching me work. Eventually she moved, settled into the armchair by the window with her legs tucked up beneath her. "You always work this quietly?" she asked after a few minutes. I smiled without looking up. Most people prefer it that way. Not me. I like knowing what's on someone's mind. I tightened a valve, tried to keep my voice steady. "Not much going on up here." "That's a lie," she said, not unkindly. I glanced over. Her gaze didn't waver. And for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. She changed the subject, just like that. Asked how long I'd lived in the building, what I did before maintenance, whether I liked it here. We talked. Not like strangers. Not quite like friends. She had this way of listening, not just hearing words, but tuning into something beneath them. Like she was always searching for the part you hadn't said out loud yet. When I finished with the heater, she stood and walked me to the door. But just before I stepped out, she said it. "You don't seem like someone who's just passing through." I turned. "What makes you say that?" She shrugged, but her voice was quiet. "I don't know. You just feel rooted." I didn't answer. Couldn't, really. That night, I lay in bed thinking about that word, rooted. I'd never thought of myself that way. I moved slow, yes. Kept things simple. But maybe she saw something in me I hadn't been willing to admit. Or maybe she was just lonely and looking for pieces of herself in other people. Either way, her words stayed with me. And so did the shape of her mouth when she said them. The next time I saw her, it was raining. I was doing rounds in the courtyard, making sure the drains weren't backed up, when I spotted her under the awning. She didn't have an umbrella, just stood there with her arms folded, watching the water collect in puddles. I should have walked on. I should have kept my head down. But I didn't. "You stuck?" I asked, stepping under the awning beside her. "Not stuck," she said, lips curled slightly. "Just watching." The rain fell in soft sheets. People rushed by outside the gate with coats pulled tight, heads down. But Sophie didn't move. "Sometimes," she said, "I think people forget how beautiful a simple downpour can be." I looked at her then, not just her face, but the way she existed inside a moment. Still, present. And maybe it was something in her expression, or the way the rain curled at the ends of her hair. But I said it before I could stop myself. "You seem like someone who's used to waiting." She turned to me, something unreadable flickering across her eyes. Maybe I am. Neither of us said anything after that. We just stood together under the awning while the world rushed past us. She didn't step away. I didn't either. It wasn't a moment we planned, but it felt like one that might matter. After that day in the rain, something shifted between us. It wasn't anything spoken. She didn't text me. I didn't knock again. But there was this low hum beneath everything now, like a faint vibration in the walls. I'd pass her in the hallway, and she'd smile, just enough to be polite, not enough to be casual. And me? I caught myself looking for excuses to linger on the third floor longer than I needed to. Tuesday morning, I was tightening a loose door hinge in Unit 3C, a routine work order. But I finished early, and instead of heading back down, I found myself hovering outside her door. Not close enough to be weird. Just listening. I heard music, low and crackling, some old jazz tune filtering through her walls like smoke. I pictured her reading on the couch, one foot tucked under the other, coffee cooling beside her. I should have left. Instead, I knocked. The music paused. A few seconds later, her door opened halfway. She looked at me with this quiet curiosity, like I'd caught her mid-thought. "Hi," I said, suddenly unsure why I was there. She opened the door wider. "Hi." I cleared my throat, rubbed the back of my neck. "Just wrapped up next door. Thought I'd check on the heater. Make sure everything's still good." She didn't blink. Just gave the smallest nod. "Come in." The apartment smelled like oranges and something earthy, rosemary, maybe. A candle burned low on the coffee table. The record had stopped spinning, needle hovering in silence. She sat on the edge of the couch while I crouched near the wall unit, pretending to listen for rattles that weren't there. "I wasn't sure you'd knock again," she said after a moment. I looked over. "You weren't." She shook her head, smiling to herself. You don't strike me as someone who moves without a reason. I stood slowly, heart suddenly louder than the silence. Maybe I just needed one, I said. That made her pause. She didn't flirt back, didn't soften the air with something easy. Instead, she met my eyes, calm, unwavering, and said, You're too young to be this careful. That one hit somewhere deep. I sat across from her, not too close. Enough distance to pretend it was nothing. You make it hard to be careless, I said, barely above a whisper. She didn't answer, but I watched her jaw tighten, just for a second, and that was more revealing than words. She reached for the remote, turned the music back on. The softest of vinyl, the saxophone slipping back into the room. We sat like that for a while, not talking, just sitting. Her ankle rested gently on her knee, and I noticed the way her fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup. Absent-minded, unthinking, but graceful. Was it a bad marriage? I asked before I could stop myself. She glanced up, surprised, not offended. No, she said, just empty. Did you love him? At first. And after? Her eyes didn't flinch. After, I made peace with the silence. I nodded. Let that sit. I think, I said slowly, some silences are lonelier than others. She smiled, but there was no joy in it. You sound like someone who's known both kinds. I didn't deny it. We sat in that shared understanding, that mutual ache neither of us was naming out loud. Eventually, she stood. I should get ready. I have dinner plans tonight. Right? I said, standing too, suddenly colder. She walked me to the door, fingers grazing the frame as she held it open. But before I stepped out, she spoke again. I like when you knock, she said, but don't do it unless you mean it. I met her eyes. I meant it. Then I left. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like the one holding back. But I did feel like something fragile had just been handed to me, and I didn't yet know how to hold it without breaking it. That Friday night, I stood on my balcony and watched the windows across the courtyard. Her living room glowed warm, soft amber against the gathering dark. I could see the silhouette of her moving slowly, a glass in hand, a record sleeve tilted under her arm. She was alone, but she didn't move like someone lonely. She moved like someone in control of her solitude. I don't know how long I stood there, one hand resting on the cold railing, watching light flicker across the wall behind her. 10 minutes, maybe 15. Long enough for a part of me to realize I had never done this before, watched someone not because I was curious, but because I missed them. It was stupid. We'd barely spoken. And yet, I felt the weight of her absence whenever I didn't see her. Saturday morning, she passed me on the stairs. Her perfume hit first, subtle, something floral, clean. She wore dark jeans, a wool coat, scarf knotted loose around her neck. I moved to the side automatically. Morning, she said, almost like nothing had changed, as if Tuesday's conversation had never happened. But then she paused, looked back. Do you like galleries? She asked. I blinked. Yeah, sure. There's one in the West End. I was going to stop by. I hate walking through those places alone. I didn't smile. Not because I wasn't happy, but because I didn't trust the part of me that wanted this too much. What time? She told me. And just like that, we had plans. The gallery was quiet, minimal. Abstract pieces hung on long white walls like questions waiting for the right person to answer them. We didn't say much, just walked, our footsteps echoing slightly on the polished floors. Now and then, she'd stop to read a caption, her head tilted just slightly. I watched her more than the art. Do you ever feel like these rooms expect too much from you? She asked at one point. How do you mean? She glanced around. All this blankness, all this white. It's like it dares you to feel something important. I gave a short laugh. You don't seem intimidated. I fake it well. It wasn't a confession, more like an invitation. Afterward, we grabbed coffee from a place she liked near the park. She didn't ask me questions. Not about my past, not about my parents, not even about where I saw myself in 5 years, which, frankly, was a relief. I was tired of people trying to build blueprints from my answers. Instead, she told me about her childhood dog, a black lab named Remy who used to sit in the hallway when she got home from school, tail thumping like a metronome of love. She talked about her ex-husband's obsession with minimalist furniture, how she never really liked leather couches but kept one for a decade just to avoid another argument. And I listened, not to respond, but just to witness. Later, walking back through the park, our hands brushed. Neither of us pulled away, but we didn't reach for each other either. I keep thinking I should feel more guilty, she said quietly. About what? This, she gestured between us. You. Me. The idea of it. I swallowed. Do you? She looked straight ahead. I feel alive. I don't know if that counts as guilt. We reached the gate to the sidewalk. Cars passed. People laughed on benches, bundled in layers against the early spring chill. I should head back, she said, fingers fidgeting with the strap of her bag. Okay. She didn't move. You're good at silence, she said, almost like an afterthought. So are you. Her eyes met mine. But yours feels different. Like you're not afraid of what might surface in it. I didn't reply, not with words. Instead, I stepped back just slightly, enough to break the tension, enough to show her I wasn't going to reach for what she wasn't ready to give. She noticed. I saw it in the way her shoulders relaxed. Good night, Ethan, she said. And for the first time, it felt like she said my name not to end something, but to hold it gently, like a promise. April came in slow, like it wasn't in any rush to be warmer. Some mornings still held frost at the edges, but the light was longer now, softer. Everything felt suspended, the kind of stretch between seasons where nothing's quite awake, but nothing's fully sleeping either. Sophie and I hadn't touched since that afternoon at the gallery. Not really. Not in any way that counted. But something lived in the space between us. A flicker. A low, steady ember that hadn't gone out since that first time I knocked on her door. She still passed me on the stairs. Still offered a nod, sometimes a smile. Sometimes nothing at all. But every time I caught her gaze, it was like we'd already said everything, and chosen, deliberately, not to say any more. One night, a Thursday, I got home to find a small note tucked under my door. It was on thick, cream-colored stationery. No envelope. Just my name in neat handwriting on the outside. Inside, 2 lines. There's wine and music. The door's unlocked. Come up, or don't. S. No time. No date. Just the assumption that I'd know. And I did. I stood there with the note in my hand for a solid minute before moving. My hands felt too big. My breath too loud. When I reached her door, it was cracked just enough to see the edge of warm light pouring through. I knocked once. Come in, she called. Her voice was calm, almost distant. I stepped inside. The room was dim. A record spun in the corner. Something slow, maybe French. She sat on the couch in a loose black sweater and leggings, hair down, barefoot, a glass of red in her hand. She didn't get up. There was a second glass on the table, already poured. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said, not looking at me. You left the door open. She smiled faintly. That's not the same thing. I sat across from her, picking up the glass she'd poured. It was room temperature. She'd poured it a while ago. We didn't toast. We just drank. Slowly. The record scratched softly between tracks. This isn't casual for you, is it? She asked after a long silence. No, I said. And it isn't for you either. She looked at me then. Fully. No hesitation. I've spent years convincing myself I didn't need anything complicated, she said. That I'd had enough confusion to last a lifetime. I made peace with loneliness because it was easier than reaching for something I wasn't allowed to want. And now, she gave the smallest shrug. Now I'm starting to realize I don't trust ease as much as I thought I did. There it was, that crack in her voice. The softness she usually kept hidden. I didn't press it. Instead, I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, heart doing something unsteady in my chest. Have I made this harder for you? I asked. Her brow furrowed, not in irritation, but something closer to tenderness. No, she said. You've made it real. We sat in that for a while, letting it settle. Then, quietly, she stood. She crossed the room, barefoot steps silent against the rug. And when she stopped in front of me, she didn't touch me. She just looked down and said, If I take one more step toward you, I don't think I'll be able to stop. I looked up at her, every muscle in my body suddenly still. I'm not asking you to, I said, but I won't pretend it won't matter. She exhaled, slow, controlled. Then she stepped back, sat again, farther this time. The silence that followed wasn't cold. It wasn't avoidance. It was mercy. I'm tired, she said, setting her glass down. Not tonight. I nodded. Okay. She walked me to the door, and just before I stepped out, she did something unexpected. She reached up, touched my face, just the edge of her fingers against my jaw, then pulled away. Thank you for not rushing this, she said. I smiled. It was the kind of smile I hadn't known I could offer her. I'd wait a year, I said, if it meant getting this right. Then I left. The air in the hallway felt colder than it should have, but it carried something with it. A promise. fragile, but whole. I didn't see her for 3 days after that night. Not in the stairwell, not in the courtyard, not at her window with a book and coffee like she usually was by 9 a.m. sharp. I told myself not to read into it. She was probably busy or gone for the weekend. People disappeared for all kinds of ordinary reasons, but I still found myself listening for her steps. On the fourth night, I came home late. Rain had just started, quiet and even. The hallway smelled like clean stone and warm air. I hadn't even taken off my jacket yet when I heard a knock. 3 soft taps. When I opened the door, she was standing there. No coat, damp hair clinging to her neck. A gray sweater hung loosely off one shoulder. She looked tired, not in a fragile way, but in a way that meant something had been fought through. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She didn't move at first, just looked around the space like it was familiar and strange all at once. Then she walked in, slow and quiet, like every step had to be decided. I shut the door behind her. The latch clicked like punctuation. She turned to me. Her expression was unreadable, but something in it was clearer than ever. "I've been trying to unfeel this," she said. I didn't move, didn't answer, just waited. "But I can't," she continued. "I've rewritten the reasons, the math, the stories I tell myself at night. And I still come back to you." She paused, drew in a breath. "I don't know what this is, and I don't know what happens next, but I need you to know. I don't feel like someone's mother when I'm with you, or someone's ex, or someone's cautionary tale. I feel like myself, maybe for the first time in years." I stepped toward her, slow, not to reach, not yet, just to be near. "I've never wanted to be careful with someone the way I want to be with you," I said. "Not because I'm afraid, but because you matter." Her eyes glistened, not from tears, from relief. Then she did something I hadn't expected. She leaned her forehead to mine, just barely touched, breath to breath. No kiss, no sudden rush, just skin and silence and a long, trembling moment of honesty. I closed my eyes, let it wash over me. Her hand came to rest on my chest, right above my heart. Steady, warm, present. "I don't want to hide from this anymore," she whispered. I nodded, voice low. "Then don't." And finally, slowly, she lifted her chin and pressed her lips to mine. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't fast. It was the kind of kiss that carries weight, that speaks for all the hours spent pretending not to feel, not to notice. It was soft and searching and real. When we pulled apart, she didn't step away. She stayed close, forehead resting against mine, her thumb tracing a line on my jaw. We didn't make promises. We didn't talk about the future. We just stood in that room. 2 people from different timelines, different wounds, different expectations, and let ourselves exist in the middle. It was enough. Eventually, she lay beside me on the couch, our fingers loosely tangled. We watched the rain streak across the windows. The world went quiet, and I knew, without needing to say it, that whatever this was, complicated, unlikely, fragile, it was also something rare, something worth protecting, even if it didn't last forever, even if we had to walk the rest of the way slowly, one careful step at a time. Because sometimes, it's not about the story everyone understands. It's about the one you live in secret, the one that changes you, quietly, deeply, without ever needing to be named.